Please welcome Mr. Joseph Spate, Deputy Chief Academic Officer, Friendship Public Charter School.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Friendship family. I apologize for the sweat. I was doing a wobble and had to run back up here, so I apologize if the bald head is shining just a little too much for you. Welcome back, colleagues. We hope you enjoy your lunch and good conversations with colleagues. Now it's time to get into another set of fascinating education issues with our teachers' panel discussion. Kevin Powell, one of the most acclaimed political, cultural, literary, and hip-hop voices in America today, will moderate. He is the author of 11 books, including Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, and The Ghost of Dr. King, blogs and essays. Among his upcoming books will be a memoir of his very difficult childhood and youth, to be released in 2015 by Simon & Schuster. And in 2016, he will publish a biography of Tupac Shakur, the late rapper and controversial American icon. Kevin's writings have also appeared in CNN.com, Esquire, Ebony, The Huffington Post, The Washington Post, Rolling Stone, The Guardian, ESPN.com, and Vibe magazine, where he worked for many years as a senior writer, interviewing public figures as different as Tupac Shakur and General Colin Powell. Kevin also routinely appears in interviews on television, radio, and in print, and on the internet discussing major issues of our time. As an activist, Kevin is the president and co-founder of BK Nation, a new national organization, progressive and multicultural, and focused on matters like education, civic engagement, leadership training, health and wellness, social media, arts and culture, and job and small business creation. As a pop culture curator, Kevin produced the very first exhibit on the history of hip-hop in America at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, which also toured America and overseas. As a humanitarian, Kevin's work includes local, national, and international efforts in the movement to end violence against women and girls, including a very well-regarded appearance on The Oprah Show highlighting domestic violence. As an acknowledgement of Kevin's life of public service and his dedication to literature and the arts, Cornell University recently became the owner of the Kevin Powell Collection, documenting nearly 30 years of his work to date in print. Photos, videos, books, handwritten notes, speeches, and select memorabilia. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Powell to the stage.
I'm right here. Thank you. Yes, sir. Appreciate it. Friendship, make some noise. Wait a minute, I came all the way from New York City, from Brooklyn. They can't hear you in New York. Make some noise, Friendship. And I saw y'all out there dancing. I want to thank God first and foremost for this opportunity. Let's give it up for the founder, Mr. Hintz. Where's he? Hold your hand. Let's give him a round of applause, please. I'm so honored to be back here. I was here a couple of years ago. I believe it was 2011, and speaking here. And I'm actually more honored to be here today because I'm here with the real leaders in America. They're known as teachers. Can you give yourselves a round of applause? Absolutely. I want to thank Simone Green, Mr. Guff, Mr. Spate for the introduction, Mr. Waller, all the distinguished guests, and most importantly, the people, everyone associated with Friendship. Make some noise, Friendship. This is so important what you all are doing here, and I love the fact that this gathering is called Transformative Practice, Friendship Education by Design. And we're talking today, this particular panel discussion, excellent teachers in excellent classrooms. And I need to ask you all this. I know there's some students here, right? Where are the students at? Okay. Does every campus have its own chant? Is that what I remember? That's right. That's right. I feel like I'm at a fraternity party. I'm an alpha, and I feel like I'm at a fraternity party. Oh, yeah. I just had to throw that out there for a second. Wow. Are we going to go through the Divine Nine? Wait, hold on. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. Are the alphas in the building? Are the Qs in the building? I said, are the Qs in the building, not dope? No, I'm kidding. You know I love y'all. Are the Kappas in the building? I know Phi Beta Sigma's in the building. Iotas in the building? Are the Iotas in the building? Wow. But y'all can't say I didn't ask, right? I did ask. AKA's in the building. Are the Deltas in the building? Sigma Gamma Rho, are you in the building? Zeta Phi Beta's in the building somewhere? Mr. Hintz, let me get focused again. So we can bring the teachers up. That's the most important thing. I'm so honored to be here because education saved my life. The first educator I ever met was my mother, as I said a couple years ago, absolutely. My mother is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, but she has a grade school and 8th grade education, but from the time I could walk and talk, she instilled in me a love of education. She told me, even though she had never been on the college campus herself, from the time I was 3 or 4 years old, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college, because she understood that education could open up so many possibilities for me. I'm actually embarrassed when the bio, the long version, is read, but I appreciate it. But I'm so clear, the 11 books and all the things that I've been able to do in my life would not exist if it wasn't for a quality education. So clear about that. I also want to acknowledge very quickly, because I think this is important when we talk about these excellent teachers. The teacher that helped me was a woman named Mrs. Lillian Williams. God bless her soul. She passed a few years ago. She was my 12th grade English teacher. And she was the first teacher who really said to me, you can be a writer. She pushed me. She put me in essay contests. I didn't think I could win anything, and I won a couple essay contests my senior year, and that's why I'm a writer. And I just want to say, when she died, and this is important to think about, 50 years of students came to her funeral to acknowledge what she had done for their lives. 50 years of students. 50 years of students. And so when we talk about education, I am so clear that it is not just the gateway to possibilities, but again, y'all are the leaders on the front lines, because who else spends as much time with young people other than a parent or parents or guardian than teachers, than educators? The last thing I want to say before I bring out these teachers, introduce them properly, is that in a couple of days, as I told Simone Green, I'm going to be going down to Missouri. And one of the reasons why education is so important is because brothers and sisters, and we all agree we're brothers and sisters here, am I right? We've got to bring our country together. I don't care if you're black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. We are all sisters and brothers. We are all sisters and brothers. We are all sisters and brothers. But education means that we need to know who we are, and we have to have the courage to learn about our neighbors as well. Am I right out there? That's so, so important. You know, it hurts my heart that just a year ago we were talking about Trayvon, and now here we go with Missouri. But I'm going down there as a peace activist, as someone who cares, and because I think that we've got to say to young people, because y'all are not tomorrow's leaders, you're not future leaders, you're leaders right now. Can y'all say right now? Right now. Right now. And Mr. Hintz knows, and many of the other folks here know, that they were a group of young people. They were called the Civil Rights Generation, who transformed this country, but they also took education seriously. That was one of the big pushes of the Civil Rights Movement. So we've got to continue to push forward. We've come very far in this country, but clearly we have some work to do, and this is why these teachers are so important. Let me introduce them. First up, Miss Elizabeth Trexler. She's a math teacher at Collegiate Academy. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Trexler. Next up is Ms. Lauren Weimkin, a math teacher at Woodridge Campus. I'm learning that I got to pause between introductions here. I got it. Next, Mr. Jason Edwards, who's an English teacher at Chamberlain campus. Jason Edwards. All right. I'm going to want to be a part of this soon. Can I get a job at this? Next, Mr. Eric Colazo, who's also an English teacher at Tech Prep Academy. All right. Wow. Thank you. Next up is Ms. Sarah Brown, who's a science teacher at Blow Pierce campus. Thank you, Ms. Brown. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Sarah Weiss, who's a special education teacher at the Southeast campus.
Southeast.
Wow. Hello.
Hello.
How you all doing?
Doing
well.
So, aren't they geniuses? Let's give it a round of applause for these geniuses. You are, you are, you are. I said to them backstage, you know, well, my first question, because I wanted to make this comfortable and informal, but at the same time offer why they're in education, why excellence is important, why our classrooms need to be excellent. But my first question was, why are you a teacher? Why did you decide to do this? Anyone can jump in.
I'm someone who didn't think I was going to be a teacher, which I think is kind of surprising. My father is a professor, and my mother is an educator as well, and now a social worker. But that's kind of run through my family line. But I somehow resisted it. When I was 17, I thought I was going to be a famous rapper. Didn't work out.
Did you have an MC name?
We'll talk about that later. It's Brother Spanky, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, but I went to college thinking, you know, I liked teaching, but it wasn't something I had aspirations for. And I'm one of those people that doesn't really say it first, but I did do Teach for America to get myself in the classroom. And I was very real with them when I sat down. I said, my goal is to be in the classroom. That's why I'm doing this. And so they surprisingly accepted me. And I started teaching in Philly and didn't know if I was going to like it, and kind of immediately loved it. I had taught in kind of other ways beforehand. But I realized one of the reasons that I really wanted to teach middle school particularly was because my middle school experience was so difficult. And I realized part of the reason it was difficult was because there weren't many people in the classroom that looked like me from a teacher perspective. So, you know, in a country where about 2 to 3% of our teaching force is black males, I thought it was really important to be a part of that hopefully growing body because so many of the students that we educate are young black males. So I looked at it as a personal responsibility to do.
Personal responsibility, yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? Anyone?
I kind of have a similar story as well. I come from a family of teachers. My grandmother was a teacher. My mother taught in Detroit public schools for 30 years. And I think just watching her, I kind of resisted teaching a little bit too, at least from like middle school to high school. But I can remember her taking her students to college and just the connections and relationships that she had made and how rewarding that could be. And math just seemed to be where I fit. Because I always loved math, and again, going through high school, I had many teachers who, this is the math book, you're going to read out of the math book, you're going to do 20 problems, and then move on with it, and I was hoping that I could make a difference in changing that.
Oh, wow. I want everyone to respond to this, please.
Yeah, I got into teaching against my mother's will. She had like vehemently gone against, like, what? We send you to the, you know, 50 grand a year college to become a teacher? And like, I got so much help for her for so much long, but I mean, now she's like really appreciative of it. But like, you know, I originally went to become a lawyer. I had the opportunity to intern as a high school senior and as a paralegal. I did it for 2 years in college. And, you know, the opportunity was great, but what I realized was that it wasn't something I was passionate about. And I did education in college as like a plan B, like, oh, just in case I don't get into a law school, I could always do education. And as I got to my final year in senior year and I started to do my actual student teaching, I realized that when I used to wake up to go to my paralegal internships, I hated it. Like, I was just like, all right, well, here's another day, another dollar. But when I came into teaching, when I was waking up, like in Massachusetts where I went, like they started at 7. Like kids were like up and at them at 6 in the morning. And I got there at 6:30, and every time I woke up, I was excited. And it was because of the kids, and because I realized like that I was creating an impact for them, and I was showing them, like he was saying, like, a role model. And I realized that my own high school experience, I didn't start appreciating education until I had somebody that was a role model for me, and I wanted to be that for someone else.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Folks, anyone want to jump in?
I too have a similar story. I went to a school for my undergrad that grooms people to go to law school, med school, something more in the private sector, and it wasn't really looked highly upon when I made the decision senior year with an economics degree to say I want to go into the classroom. And I think the reason I've stayed in the classroom for the past, this will be my 4th year, is just there is a need inside of me to give back. Having done other jobs where you don't get the interaction you do being a teacher, it just aren't fulfilling. And so the reason I'm still in a classroom, made the decision to go into a classroom, is there's a need inside of me to kind of give back to society, and this is my fit for right now.
Wow, thank you. Ladies, thank you.
I always loved learning when I was a kid, but man, school was just so boring to me. I mean, I think a lot of us were taught out of a textbook. And then I had this physics teacher in 11th grade, and you didn't even bring books. You cleared the tables, and he gave us all this stuff, and he'd be like, here's this problem, I need you to find a solution. And I learned more, I think, in that one class, that 1 year, than I did in all of my other 12 years of education. And I just wanted to be that for somebody else, so.
Thank you.
I have a similar background to a lot of the other teachers up here. My mom is in education, and when I went to college, I studied sociology, and I looked at issues on a really large scale. And I always loved kids, and I thought about teaching, but I was like, I need to do something bigger. And then I realized this is way bigger than anything I learned in sociology. This is, trying to close the achievement gap on the ground level, working with kids every day. And so just combining my love of kids, and I love to fight for the underdog. I'm a special education teacher, so I work. So just always that drive to provide quality education for kids who are coming from not as fortunate backgrounds, and especially those kids who really need advocates, who struggle with learning, became an unbelievable passion of mine. So that's just continued to motivate me every day.
Wow. Before I do a follow-up question, I meant to say this when I was when I was up there. When I was coming up the escalators, between the 2nd level and the 3rd level, you'll see a big piece of art by an artist named Radcliffe Bailey. He happens to be a very close friend of mine. When Radcliffe was a child, he was in special education. But luckily, his mother happened to be a teacher, and she saw that he was a visual learner, and so she put him in art classes. And to this, now in 2014, his art is owned by people like Elton John, Spike Lee, and is all over the world, including right in the convention center. And so that leads to my question. Someone used the word boring to describe education. You all talked about personal responsibility. You said it was a way of giving back. How do you, when you first went into a classroom, did you think about the word excellence or the phrase excellent teacher? And what does that mean to you? And how's it translated into the work that you do in the classroom so you don't ever become that boring teacher that many of us can talk about? It sound like, what was Charlie Brown's teachers? What was that sound, y'all? Wah, 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 wah. Exactly. We all know it, don't we? Anyone? What does that mean for you, practically speaking, excellence, as a math teacher, as a science teacher, as an English teacher? Yes, ma'am.
To go off what I was saying before about working with kids with special needs, I think making sure that we're not getting tuned out like Charlie Brown's teacher. A lot of it is providing access to all kids, making sure that we're meeting them where they're at, hitting all of the different learning styles. I've seen a lot of kids who have come to Friendship Southeast from another school, and maybe they didn't have a good school experience before. Maybe they had teachers that they didn't take the time to learn enough about them, and they didn't take the time to really learn what they knew and what they didn't. And so kids were coming, hiding under tables, scared.
Did you say hiding under the tables?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm proud to say that student at the end of the year loved reading and grew about a year and a half. But I think making sure that we're always meeting kids where they are and getting them engaged with the process of learning is really important to making sure that they're excited to come to school every day and they feel like they can be successful.
Can you give us an example of meeting a student where they are that you saw was effective in your approach?
Yeah, and I know all the teachers here do work really hard to meet kids where they're at, giving assessments at the beginning of the year, learning reading levels and MAP scores and all the data that everyone loves. But I think also just learning about your students and knowing little things about them, like the face they make when they're getting a little too frustrated, that they might need a little break, or some of their triggers, or just little things about each student that I know everyone here does, which is what makes you a wonderful teacher. Just some of those skills that they don't teach you in education class, but that you kind of have, and it's part of why we're all here.
So we're talking about excellence, and thank you. Please, what does it mean to you, and how do you approach it in a classroom?
I think one thing with excellence, when I read, that we were this panel of expert teachers, I think that part of being an expert is being lifelong learners, as we all are, and knowing that you're not a sole expert, that you have to seek out other experts in order to procure your practice. When I was driving here today on the radio, that was talking about the importance of finding mentors, and so seeking people out who can assist you in your practice, whether that be students, other colleagues, other people in different professions, just to make sure that you are the best teacher that you can be, and admitting that you don't know everything, admitting that you do need help, I think is one key piece to being an excellent teacher.
Wow, admitting that you don't know everything. Wow, that's honest. Anyone else, please?
Yeah, I think it is 3 parts to excellence. I think the first part is passion. I think you have to definitely go into this work with passion. You have to actually be there for the kids, and I think that's the second part of it, authenticity. The kids need to know that you're there for them. You're not there for your glory, you're there to serve them, and to make sure that you're pushing their glory. And that leads to also this idea that you need to be innovative and reflective. And I think that that's the crucial thing that I've learned this past year, is that if you take a step back and reflect on the things that worked, that didn't work, or things that you would like to try, and not be afraid to fail. And part of the innovative process is learning from that failure and just tweaking it so that it can work for your class. Because every day, as it was said earlier, every day is different, every year is different, and every student is different each day.
What do you learn from students? Just to follow up really quickly.
I'm really big on personal relationships. I think a lot of the learning that occurs in my classroom is not during class time. I really get to know their lives. You get to know what they're interested in. I'll try to incorporate that within my lessons. And I just like to know their story. My very first day of class, I always start with my story, and I like them to share their own. Because we all get to realize that, we've all been through some type of struggle. We all deal with certain things, but it's that grit and that willingness to persevere that is what's going to get us to success.
Thank you. Thank you. With excellence, I want to stay on that. How do you approach it in your classroom?
I think part of my desire to be excellent, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself to be an expert or master teacher by any means, but I think that a lot of my aspiration comes from my own sense of perfectionism. I think that I like to be as great as I can at anything that I try. And that's part of how I was raised in that my parents looked at education as kind of a contest. How much can you learn? How much can you read? How much can you master? And so I try to have that sort of sense of, I'd say maybe competitive nature, I guess, with my students. I want to foster that sort of level of, can you do better than you've done before? Can you do this even better? There's I think, relatively healthy sense of competition between students, between classes of my students, that they want to strive to be better. That we'll look at our data every week and say, what did you do last week? What did you do to make steps to improve upon that this week? And comparing that data and looking at it in real time, I think is helpful for a student to say, I may not be where I want to be right now, but I am getting better. And excellence is definitely attainable if you look at things in a gradual process and not just, that's where I want to be, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. The other side of it is having a good amount of content mastery. I'm someone who didn't have an undergraduate degree in education. I studied Africana studies and music. And whatever I wanted to learn, I feel like I did want to master. And I think I'm confident in telling my students I know what I'm doing. I'm not someone who just read the textbook yesterday. I'm not here telling you how to do something that I didn't know how to do when I was your age. I'm good at this, I know what I'm doing, so trust me. And when you, I think, establish that trust with your students, they'll go anywhere with you. When they know that you know what you're talking about and that you wouldn't lead them astray, I think excellence comes naturally to them. They want to do what you're asking them to do. They believe that what you're telling them is the right thing to do, and it's our job to be responsible and also to be educated enough to do that for them.
Let me ask you, thank you. English, am I right?
Yes.
One of the criticisms of education today is that a lot of our young people are not being prepared properly to communicate. I've seen it with interns that I've had even this summer constructing basic paragraph sentences. How do you challenge that in the era of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LOL, OMG? Y'all feel where I'm going with this? You know, you're laughing, but you know what I'm saying. And I also, you know, for all of you, you know, because you have people who say, I hate math, I hate science. How do you respond to that to bring that excellence out? I want to keep it there, then the two last teachers, please.
Sure. I think that's definitely an uphill battle that we fight daily. This kind of lack of reliance. I mean, I was a spelling bee kid, and spelling bees are kind of now drifting into obsolescence, and I don't really like that idea. I mean, it is true that a computer will have spell check, but there's a sense of knowledge, of kind of lexile skill that I think is dying in some ways. And I actually talked about this yesterday at my campus, that we need to make it cool to read. I think that's one thing that helps combat this idea that, well, I don't need to, I can just be on Twitter or Instagram and those sort of things and absorb things in a less steeped in text way. And the culture of reading, I think, is one of the biggest things that does change that idea of reading and of writing, but specifically of reading, of knowing that adults are always reading. That when I came to the classroom, I just finished putting down my book and I want to talk to you about it right now. Because if there's this contagious feeling of I want to read, and reading is a way that I can learn things, then you don't get into this situation where you have students who have rarely read anything, you know, trying to do a college application and write a 5-paragraph essay and not be familiar enough with language and vocabulary to craft it well. So part of it, I think, is our responsibility to be role models, to be readers who are role models. And that level of being involved in text and really wanting to dialogue about text with students leads them to want to read on their own and read for themselves. And that, I think, leads to another level of desire to learn, to read, to write better, to be more eloquent, to express themselves the way that they want to. Because our students have great things to say. They just oftentimes have a limited vocabulary with which to say it. So giving students, you know, a plethora of words to use to talk about how they're feeling. I'm a teacher that I hate sad, mad. How does the character feel? He feels bad. It's not enough, because you're not really using the precise word that you want to say at that moment. So these sort of things, I think, we build upon by being role models to our students.
Last two teachers, I wanted to, please.
Coming from a math perspective, something I try to do with the students that just to impress upon them how important what we're doing in our 6th and 5th grade math classes is bring simple things like supermarket ads in and explain, like, if you want to be a knowledgeable member of your community, you need to know how to do this math, and explaining to them, you know, it's not okay to say, oh, well, everybody uses the calculator. Nobody really does that, Miss Wimpke. Nobody analyzes like the cost per pound of this versus this. And so trying to bring in real world examples that they see adults in their lives doing, and teaching them you could actually maybe do that better than the adults that you see doing it. And I think just giving kids an opportunity, especially with math, not to just sit and do problem sets and worksheets, but focus on just real world, hands-on things that can be done in a math class that really get them to understand where they're going to see this math once they're outside of my classroom, is what I try to focus on.
I want to stay there for a second, because we tend to dismiss math so much, which I think is unfortunate. When I got out of high school, I actually won the math award. My yearbook says I wanted to be an accountant, and I'm a writer. Can you believe that? Things happen. But why is math so important in our world, particularly in this era of this technological revolution and everything? Why is it so important to you? And science.
Well, math is, unlike English, math is a universal. English can be used around the world as well, but math is used in every country in the world. And I've explained to students that there isn't a single country where the students and people to function don't have to use math. And I think, especially in today's day and age with things, advances in STEM, the science, math, technology areas with jobs, I think especially now, for our students to be able to compete on a global level, it's no longer just competing against peers in the US, students from other states. It's if you want to be able to compete, you have to go up against people from other countries. And so I think now more than ever, math is incredibly important, that we're making sure students at a young age are prepared going into high school so they can be prepared for college and not be taking remedial math courses in college, because they're going to be needing to do more than that to compete with students from other countries.
Do your students know that they're already indulging in math and analysis if they're sports fans with statistics, video games, etc.? Is it a way of approaching it, maybe things that they are into that uses numbers?
This past year, I really tried to integrate more technology into my classroom. And Friendship Woodridge, at least, was fortunate enough to have Chromebooks in all of the classes, so that allowed me to really get them on the computers using virtual models, things that they might see more in like an engineering type class when they're a little older. And I know at Woodridge they have a Smart Lab course where they are building like physical and also virtual models, again, that mimic real world types of tasks they'll do in careers.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I think I'd like to go back to what Ms. Beckwith said earlier in her address about how she learns every day, and that makes her a stronger educator. And I feel I have the privilege of teaching the wonderful students at Blow Pierce, and they are brilliant, and the things they come up with when you present them with a challenge are just so profound. And I work very closely with the Smart Lab facilitator so we can try to extend projects students are working on in as many classes as possible. And we were talking about how sometimes we'll come up with this solution to a problem that we've presented the students with, and they come up with 20 different solutions that are nothing like ours. In fact, they're much better. And so to me, when I feel like I've had an effective day with my kids, it's a day when every student in the room is critically thinking about solving a problem. And so to me, if I'm teaching them about factors that influence gravitational attraction, it's more important to me that they have solved a problem about that concept than memorized the definition of gravity. And so I think pushing critical thinking, especially we talked a lot about the jobs that are available, this is going to be the most important tool that our kids can walk out of school with.
Wow, critical thinking, two of you talked about not stuffing stuff in your brain, memorizing stuff. And so it kind of leads to the next question, which is, what is an education? What does it mean to you now? And what, from your own background growing up, learning, do you apply to your classroom? And what are some things you're like, no, that doesn't really work the way I was taught? Can we be honest about this? Because I was actually in New Jersey at Rutgers, and it was a scholars program for high schoolers, and a few of the students said straight up, my teacher sucks. And clearly, y'all are great, right? Friendship is great, we agree to that. But how do you make sure, what does education mean to you? And how do you transform that, some of the stuff that worked for you growing up, but some of the stuff you're like, nah, this is not gonna work?
I think that problem-solving piece really is key, and you can see that obviously with the new assessments that they're coming out with, because I think that they're trying to align it more so to what students will be facing when they leave.
Yeah.
And going back to like what I was brought up with in school, it wasn't just the feeding of knowledge. Now, as a teacher, I thought, oh, I have this math content, I know it all, it's great. I feel like I've learned so much from my students in the past 5 years of teaching, not just on how to teach the material, but other ways of presenting the material, because like we've talked about, every single class, even every single period, is not the same. And I've had the opportunity to work with students at the honors level. This was my first year having a co-teacher with a large special ed population, and without Mr. Lindhorst out there, I definitely I never had one of those in high school, and so I think it was just a new way of
A co-teacher.
A co-teacher,
Yeah.
yep. How to reach kids and do everything that's possible, even if it's not how you learned. You have to be willing to learn in order to.
Even if it's not how you learn, you have to be willing to learn. Wow. Anyone else want to jump in on that? How you were educated and what's changed for you?
I think for myself, I didn't start appreciating education until high school, and the reason behind that was because I went to an all-boys Jesuit school, and like from day one, they imparted that your education isn't just for the sake of going to college, it's for a purpose, social justice. And that's what I try to do with my students now, and I think that all education should have that, whether it be social justice or just like this purpose that you're going to apply it in your life. Like you're going to, the ability, like in my class with English, like they can analyze a text, and now you can analyze a problem that you're going to have an impact in your community or things like that. And I feel like if you apply purpose to your lessons and the kids can see that connection, like, oh, this isn't just me just learning, X, Y, Z today. I'm actually going to be able to use this in my life, not just for simple, like, students will be able to do this so they can get to college, but so that they could just be successful people in general. I think that makes a huge difference in the leap between, like, rote memorization, which is back in the day, and now where it's, like, application. We're going to use this in the future.
Thank you.
I think I definitely had teachers that sucked. So
You teach.
I teach 8th grade ELA.
Okay.
And I've definitely, in my educational career, had teachers that, as you say, sucked. And I think all of us have.
Yeah.
And I think part of every teacher is this small but healthy kind of voice in the back of your head that says, I never want to be that. That teacher that made that learning so boring for me, I never want to be that. So I reflect on my own educational experience pretty regularly, specifically middle school, and realize that the teachers that I learned the most from were in many ways just these charismatic figures. And that's not to say that you don't need to know your content, because I do believe I've said, that's also important. But there is something to be said about the way you deliver your content. And sometimes, and I look at this from a performance standpoint, I consider myself somewhat of an amateur musician. I think that planning a lesson is like planning a set list. You gotta have a strong opener, you gotta have a strong closer, and you gotta keep them hooked all the way through. And a lot of teachers are great performers. You really have to find a way of making everything that you're teaching the most interesting thing happening in this room, in your life, right now, at this moment. Sometimes that's really hard to do, and sometimes you gotta fake it. But one thing I do love is the fact that I love reading. I love English. I love using words. And because of that, everything's exciting to me. And so when I come to the classroom, we're gonna learn about alliteration, and this is the coolest thing in the world. And you're gonna believe it because I believe it. So I think that is one of the things that makes kind of teaching students a lot easier, and it doesn't make it so much of a chore or a challenge. I definitely had, the harder days, and everyone's had those. But it's definitely something that makes the job a lot more rewarding. That ability to make kids feel like what we're doing is way more important than anything else you can think of right now, because it is.
I'll jump in on.
Yes, please.
Actually, most of the time when I tell people that I teach middle school, they're like, oh, God bless you. And I actually really disagree, because they're not checked out in middle school. They want you to check them back in. And so it is actually very easy to say to them, today we're learning about force, and this is the coolest thing in the world. And if you believe it, they'll believe it too. And even if you don't have that performer personality, you can still show them how cool the content is. I'm very quiet and reserved, and I am that way with my students as well. But I can still get them really excited about what they're doing, just in the way that it's presented. And I think that is very different from the way that I was educated, where our teachers, my teachers, didn't really care if we bought in or not.
They didn't care if you bought in or not.
No,
Wow.
we heard, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard the line, it's my job to teach you and it's your job to learn. And if you don't learn it, I've still done my job. But I think that all of us and everyone in this room doesn't think that. If the students haven't learned it, we haven't done our jobs. And so if we need to say it's the coolest thing in the world, and believe it's the coolest thing in the world, and that's what everybody is going to do.
Talking about your educational experiences. Did we get everyone? Did everyone speak? No.
No, just to add on to what everyone is saying, I think my favorite class was my 5th grade class. I had Mrs. Corbacero, and it was just so much fun to go to school every day. We learned, I feel like we learned about everything, but one thing that I loved was the community in the classroom. She just made everything, she made the content exciting, and she made just interacting with her and the other classmates so comfortable, and everyone felt comfortable asking questions. Everyone felt comfortable really delving deeply into whatever we were learning. Granted, it was 5th grade, but it was just a really exciting place to be and a really comfortable place to be. And I think that's something that, as a teacher, is really important for me, is having the kids supporting each other and making the school a comfortable place to learn. I know that Southeast, as a staff member, is really an exciting place to come into in the morning. It's a warm culture, and I think the staff feels it, and the scholars feel it, and the parents feel it. And I think that's one thing that is really important, is having a nurturing, comfortable environment.
So what do you, I'm sure you all have encountered it. You have a student or some students that come in, they don't talk at all. Or everything out of their mouths is, I can't, I don't, I won't. You know? Or basically what I'm getting at, the self-esteem is very low, and they don't think that they're geniuses. They don't think that they're excellent. They've never been told that. How do you deal with that as a teacher in the classroom? Because a lot of folks, I've heard people say, and it's kind of to your point, one of your points, where just teaching and either they get it or they don't. I mean, do you think about, I don't want any of these students to be left behind in my classroom? And how do you approach that?
I was able to loop with my students, and I can honestly say it took an entire year, including summer, for me to actually trust and allow myself to be vulnerable enough in front of the kids to really reach some of them. And it took a year for some of them to get to that point where they would be willing to be vulnerable around me, to let me know, okay, I don't know how to do this, and I know you're just trying to help. And it really took a lot of coaching. It took a lot of asking for help, admitting failure, and maybe not quite understanding, why am I not opening up to this student? Why are these students not opening up to me? And it really was in that second year with the students that we kind of started to get into a groove. And it really came down to them feeling safe, them feeling comfortable enough to be vulnerable, to know that, you know, Ms. Wimkin is not going to embarrass me. And also just impressing this sense of urgency. It was kind of selfish, because I would say things like, this is the most important part of your day. This 90 minutes, like, we gotta go. This is it. And if there's one skill you need to take home today, it's what you're learning in the next 90 minutes. So there were lots of instances where students shut down, but impressing just that sense of urgency, like, you can't, like, we cannot afford to lose any minute of this 90 minutes.
It's, you know, it's fascinating, because I was, as you were saying about your own vulnerability, I was thinking about K through 12. I can't recall a single teacher saying something like that and being like that in the classroom. I appreciate your honesty, because I think that's part of it. You know, are we willing to share with students? But I guess the question becomes, how much do you share, and in order to reach that student, make sure that she or he is not left behind? Anyone thinking about it?
I'm someone who has tried to find ways of connecting with the student, largely outside the classroom, as Eric was saying too, building a relationship with the student. And one of the things that I try to do is always to be available after school, because I realize that most of the breakthrough moments that happen don't necessarily happen in that 90-minute block with those 25 kids in the room. Oftentimes it's those 20 minutes right after school where they go, oh, this is exactly what I didn't understand. And we can actually have a full conversation about what is it that you didn't get and how can I help you get it. So I do see the value, and I try to, you know, leave an hour of my schedule at the end of the day, every day from Monday through Thursday, just for tutoring. For students to come in and talk about their homework, to figure out things they didn't understand, and that kid who is usually maybe too shy to say something in class can start building up confidence by seeing me after school. And eventually, you know, we have conversations, I think pretty overt conversations in that time, saying, I need you to talk about this in class, because they start to realize that their questions are questions that other students have had as well. There's a sense of, I think, personal fear that a lot of students have that I'm the only person that didn't understand this. And so I'm not going to say anything at all, because it's going to isolate and ostracize me. And granted, a lot of kids are sometimes mean to their peers and look for anything that they can choose to be a factor to help them tease them. And one, you have to eliminate that by having, you know, a welcoming classroom environment. And two, you need to normalize mistakes. Admitting to your own as a teacher, saying I make mistakes all the time. And then two, saying you're not the only person that made this mistake. So one thing I do every week when we review our quiz is that I show real data of each question. And I say, this is a question that only, let's say, 48% of you got correct, which means we didn't get this as a whole. It's not a you thing, it's a class thing. So we can actually talk about what it is we don't understand without it being like, well, maybe just one person or two people didn't get it, and feeling so ostracized and so alone in your, you know, in your lack of knowledge.
We only have a little bit more time, so I want to thank you. Absolutely. Please.
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about STEM education is that it's really pushing project-based learning into all classrooms, reading and social studies and math included. And the beautiful thing about project-based learning is that some of my lowest readers are some of my best thinkers. And
can you say that again? Some of my
lowest readers are some of my best thinkers.
Wow.
So students who oftentimes feel like they're sinking in their ELA class or struggling with math come into science and they are the one everyone wants to be in a group with. And I think when you talk about student confidence, that does just wonders for that child, because I think all of our kids are capable of learning at such an extraordinary level. And so yes, we need to work with them on reading, because they won't survive in this world if they can't read. But that doesn't mean that because they're behind in reading or math that they don't have something to offer the class. And so I think that when you build that community after school and also in class, it's such an amazing thing for students who felt like school is challenging for them their whole life. I've had students who have, not at the school I'm currently at, but used to come to school only for science class.
Wow.
And then leave.
And then leave.
And then leave.
Wow.
So I think that we can reach so many students just by making them feel valued and then working on their other skills with them to get them to where they need to be.
It sounds like you all saying, does anyone else want to weigh in on this? It sounds like you're talking about holistic development of young people. That's what it, yes.
I was gonna say, like, I think sometimes we also overlook that these are human beings as well. And as human beings, like, you can talk to them and you can ask them what's wrong, or, you know, I usually do what I sit with them and I set the tone like, okay, look, you're not participating, or you haven't been answering in class, so like, I need you to do this, like, this is a non-negotiable, but what can I do to help you to get there? And I've had students just like flat out tell me like, well, I don't like sharing out, but could you read it? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, and I'll keep it anonymous, so they'll write it down and I'll read out the answer. And then eventually that student, I mean, I taught a reading intervention course, so I had a bunch of kids that were just like really scared to answer because they had, you know, never experienced success before. But after sharing their answers multiple times, like, oh yeah, I have a great, you know, exemplar example of a student who responded, and then all of a sudden, like, they stop being anonymous and they're like, yeah, Mr. Colazo, like, you can call on me. And little things like that. Or I even worked one time, just like, again, another strategy is like with a kid, again, wasn't participating, wasn't adding to the class. And what they did was they had a signal. You know, they put two fingers in the air when they wanted to actually participate, and they were confident in that answer. And I would just tap on their desk like, listen, the next 3 questions I need you to answer. And it's just preparing them. And I think giving them that heads up, like, you know, I'm not forgetting about you. That you're not going to get lost in the way. You're on my mind, and I want you to step up because I believe in you. And I think that makes a difference because it shows you care, and it also builds your confidence slowly. So then eventually you go from holding their hands to them running.
Thank you. We've got to wrap this up, but I want to get closing comments from each of you. If you start, Ms. Trexa, please. If you can end this phrase, which this is called, excellent teachers in a classroom means what to me? What does it mean to you?
What does excellent teaching mean?
What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
I think excellent teaching really means holding all kids to really high expectations and giving them the tools to get there, regardless of if they have a disability or if they're where they need to be or advance. Giving all kids a challenge, but something that's very attainable, and just really giving them the tools that will make them successful. Making kids feel confident and celebrating the small successes, holding really high expectations, but celebrating all the little wins so that they grow in confidence. And really, really showing the kids that you love them and that if they work hard, they'll get smarter.
I was looking for that word love all day.
Yeah.
We got it. There it is. It was there, though, in what you all were saying. Thank you.
I think excellent teaching is teaching students how to problem solve and think about whatever is put in front of them. And I think something that's really important is that excellent teaching looks different for everybody. At my school, there are so many examples of excellent teaching happening every day, and I just feel like I learned so much just walking through my building. And so I think it's also that willingness and that drive to take in that information from what other colleagues have to offer you.
And I hate to do this to the last four. You can do it in 30 seconds or less because I just got the big time exclamation point. Sorry.
I'll keep it simple. I think excellent teaching to me is just never being comfortable with what is. I think just always seeking out better ways and reflecting and just like pushing to that next level and never stopping.
Thank you.
I think just like not resting on your laurels. I think excellent teaching is also transparent, that you're willing to admit what you don't know to yourself, to your colleagues, and also to your students, and be willing to get better together.
I would say excellent teaching 5 to 10 years from now would look like all of the students I've had this past year having the opportunity to go to college and feeling as though whether they go or not go, they were fully capable of it and being in a position not feeling as though I can't go, but I can go and taking the path they want to take.
Thank you. Wow.
And I'm going to be really corny and go back to the theme of today. I think that excellent teaching truly is transforming your practice to meet the needs of whoever you're teaching that particular moment.
That's right. Let's give it up. Let's give a, hey. Let's give another round of applause. Can I just say their names first, please? Miss Elizabeth Trexler, Miss Lauren Wimpkin, Mr. Jason Edwards, Mr. Eric Colazzo, Miss Sarah Brown, Miss Sarah Weiss. Thank you. And if I may say this, I've been a part of a lot of educational programs like this, and this was highly informative. I appreciated your honesty, your passion, your love for young people, and I learned a lot just sitting here listening to you all. So I just want to thank you all for having me, and thank you, Friendship, because this is one of the best schools in the country. I hope you all realize that. So thank you. Let's thank you. I think we're done, right? I saw someone say time, and then she disappeared. Are we good? I don't know how to say goodbye. Well, goodbye. Thank you.